welcome you to another installment of my video blog, A Walk Through the Prophets. And today we're looking at Ezekiel chapter 7, where God discusses the upcoming end, his execution of his judgment against the children of Israel. Very weighty, very hefty, pretty eye-opening, and it was very imminent. What we saw previously in chapter 6, where God said that his heart was broken over the sin of Israel. That was kind of a behind-the-scenes picture of how God was responding to the ongoing rebellion of Israel. As we look at chapter 7, we see kind of the continuation of that, his carrying out of what he promised. We start off verses 1 through 10, 11, 12. God is saying, okay, the end is here. An end is here. My wrath is coming. Doom is here. These types of things. Saying, okay, this judgment that I've promised, it is imminent. It is upon you now. As we look at Ezekiel chapter 7, it seems like three things come to the surface in regard to God's counts against the children of Israel. The first thing that hits me is in verse 7, where God speaks through Ezekiel saying, "Doom has come on you, inhabitants of the land. The time has come, the day is near. There will be panic on the mountains and not celebration." What we talked about last time, where we had Ezekiel prophesy actually to the landscape, to the mountains where false worship was taking place. We see that on these mountains there were the altars, the shrines, the Asherah poles, all these things. Places were previously in the mountains where there was celebration. God is saying, no, there's not going to be celebration, there's going to be panic. Instead of this false worship that you've been engaging in, there's going to be panic. You're going to be fearful, you're going to be frightened, because you'll see finally that there is emptiness in this type of worship, this idol worship that you have been a part of for so long. A second thing that I see in chapter 7 is a sense of self-sufficiency. And that sounds familiar to me because I know that I'm awfully self-sufficient. In verse 11, God says through Ezekiel, "None of them will remain, none of their multitude, none of their wealth, and none of the eminent among them." All these things that the children of Israel had built up, God is saying here, you know what? Those count for nothing when it comes to my judgment against you. When it comes to trying to save you in times of trouble, these three things will not help. The first thing is, none of their multitude. You know what? You might think there is strength in numbers, children of Israel. That's not the case here. That does not help. None of their wealth. All this stuff that you've accumulated through plunder, through rummaging people that you've taken captive, these things you've picked up along the way, your wealth, your stuff, it's not going to help you at all, especially now in time of trouble. And then none of the eminent among them. You might have people among you, children of Israel, who have position, who have authority, who have power. You know what? They're not going to hold a candle to the power and authority of God who is executing judgment against you. These things you think you have going for you, they count for nothing. Nothing at all. We see that there. So God is shooting down the self-sufficiency of the children of Israel. Another thing that hits me is in verse 19, where he says through Ezekiel, "They will throw their silver into the streets, and their gold will seem like something filthy. Their silver and gold will be unable to save them in the day of the Lord's wrath." These pieces of gold and silver, these things are items that were taken by plunder. Symbols of victory. However, these are symbols of false victories. These things that were picked up along the way while the children of Israel were disobedient to God. God is saying here, you know what? These things, again, don't count at all for you. Three things, again, that we see in chapter 7 that God is holding against the children of Israel is this: false worship. What do we worship? We go to church. We sit in the pews on the weekend and we sing songs. Are we thinking about God, or are we thinking about the person next to us? Are we worshiping ourselves? Do we hold ourselves more highly than we ought to? Or are we focusing on the sufficiency of Christ as we worship? Another thing is self-sufficiency. Do we go to God in prayer? Is that our first response to any kind of situation? Or do we usually hold off on asking until we've figured out, you know what, I can't pull myself up on my own bootstraps this time. God, maybe I need some help. What is our gut reaction to adversity? Is it prayer? Is it sufficiency on Christ? Or is it self-sufficiency? Another thing that we see here in chapter 7 is where God is holding against the children of Israel false victories. Things that came about by their own strength. Things that really yielded very little value. What type of victories are you aiming for in this life? What kind of degrees are you chasing after? What kind of job promotions are you chasing after? What kind of wealth are you chasing after? Are they false victories that you're trying to win? Or are these things that you're doing, are they directed by God? It's a challenge to me too. What am I doing with my life? What are the attitudes of my heart toward God? I want to thank you for joining me here on a walk through the prophets. In chapter 8, we do see where God sends Ezekiel in a vision to the temple, where it is defiled, where it is roughed up quite a bit. A shocking situation. What are the parts of our lives that we hold on so dearly? We'll talk about those things. I wish you a very good week ahead, and subscribe, make some comments, and we'll be in touch.